Hungarian Folk Tales. The Salt Princess. Once upon a time there lived an old king who had 3 beautiful daughters. The old king wanted to find husbands for his daughters before he died, but he could not decide which daughter should receive the most beautiful of his 3 kingdoms. So he decided to give his most beautiful kingdom to the daughter who loved him the most. The old king asked his daughters, and the eldest replied, "I love you, dear father, as a dove loves good grain." "What about you, child?" "I love you, dear father, as a hot summer day loves a cool breeze." "And what about you, daughter?" "I love you, dear father, like people love salt." "What do you mean, salt? You ungrateful child. Is this what I raised and loved you for all these years? Get out of here! Get out of my sight!" His daughter tried to explain that people love salt very much indeed. She sobbed and begged, but her father shunned her from his palace. The poor princess walked and walked. She was terribly sad. She walked until she reached a vast forest. There she found a large hollow tree, and she hid herself inside it. She lived by gathering delicious nuts and ripe berries from the green forest. One day, the prince from the neighbouring kingdom was out hunting when he happened to pass by. He was chasing a deer when he spotted the princess. But when she saw the prince, she hid in a hollow tree. The handsome prince soon found the tree and shouted into the hollow, "Who is in there?" But the princess refused to reply. "Who is in there? Speak up." "Speak up or I'll shoot." The terrified princess eventually appeared. She was so beautiful, but she could not stop crying. The prince was so overcome that he embraced the sad princess, sat her high on his horse, and took her home to his palace. Their wedding was so grand that even the dogs ate beef broth, and the young couple lived as happily as 2 doves. Time passed until the young king asked his bride one day, "Tell me, why did your father chase you away?" "Because I told him that I loved him like people love salt." "Why, is that all?" Then the young king had an idea and sent a letter to the old king, inviting him to come and visit. The old king came the very next day in a golden carriage. The young king led him to his grandest chamber and sat him down at the table. His servant served soup, but it had no salt in it. And the meat had no flavour either. The king ate a great deal, but was still left feeling hungry. He remained silent for a while, but eventually had to speak. "What kind of cook do you have, son? Who makes food with no salt?" "I heard you don't like salt, sire." "Who told you that?" "Why, your daughter, of course." Then the princess appeared. The king's daughter smiled at her old father, who shed tears of joy. Father and daughter embraced, and the king gave his most beautiful kingdom to his youngest daughter. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Pig and the Wolves. Once upon a time, there was a little pig who lived in a little house in the middle of a vast forest. The little pig was cooking supper one day when a scruffy wolf knocked on his door. "Little pig, let me in. It's so cold out here, I'll freeze to death." "No, I won't let you in because you'll eat me up." "Just let my back leg in or I'll freeze to death." The little pig put a big pot of water to boil on the fire, and then he let the wolf's back leg into the house. "Oh, little pig, please let my other back leg in too." "Little pig, please let my 2 front feet in now." The little pig let the wolf's 2 front feet in, but the scruffy wolf still wasn't happy. "Little pig, please let all of me in, and I promise I won't hurt a hair on your head." The little pig found a sack and held it open so that the wolf would walk right into it. And that's what he did. The little pig wasted no time and tied the sack up in a flash. Then he took the pot off the fire and poured boiling water all over the wolf. The steaming hot water made the wolf shout, and he wriggled and jiggled until he pushed the sack open. The bold, scolded wolf jumped out of the sack and saw the little pig sitting at the top of the tree. And the wolf ran off to find help. scolded wolf eventually returned with the other wolves. The wolves thought and thought about how they would catch the little pig, as none of them could climb a tree. At long last, they decided to stand on one another's shoulders until they reached the little pig. The wolves climbed quickly one on top of the other. The bold, scolded wolf stayed at the bottom because he was afraid of heights, so the others all climbed on top of him. The Tower of Wolves reached up to the sky until they only needed one more wolf on the top. The last wolf started to climb, and the little pig shouted, "Pour hot water on the bold one!" The bold, scolded wolf leapt out from the bottom of the pile and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. The wolves tumbled to the ground in a heap of furry bones. Then all the little piglet had to do was to jump down from the tree and go back into his little house. And the bad wolves never dared come near again. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pork Pudding. Once upon a time, there lived a man who had a pig. The pig grew very big and fat, so the man decided to slaughter it for food. By the time spring came, the man and his family had eaten everything but the pork pudding. One day, the man went to tend his vines while his wife and 3 daughters stayed at home to cook supper. The wife told the eldest daughter, "Go up into the attic and fetch the pork pudding, my girl, and we'll cook it for your father's supper." The eldest girl did as she was told and was about to cut the pork pudding down when it spoke to her. "What do you want? You won't eat me, because I'll eat you first." And with these words, it ate the girl up. The wife could not imagine why her daughter had not come back down with the pork pudding. So she sent the second eldest daughter up to the attic to fetch it. But the fat pork pudding ate the second daughter up as well. So the wife sent the youngest girl up to fetch the pork pudding. But the youngest daughter did no better than her sisters, and the bulging pork pudding ate her up too. The wife could not imagine what had happened to her three darling daughters. "Well, I shall see for myself," she said, and went up into the roof. When she saw the size of the enormous pork pudding, she was pleased. But when she tried to cut the pork pudding down, it ate her up in a single mouthful. That evening, the man returned home from his vines to find no one at home to cook his supper. There was no supper on the stove, and not even a fire inside it. The man searched high and low for his wife and three daughters. He realized that he would go hungry, so he went up to the attic to fetch the pork pudding to eat for his supper. But when the man got up into the attic and tried to cut the round pork pudding down, it shouted at him like it had at the others. "You won't eat me, I'll eat you first." And without any ado, the pork pudding ate the man up. By now, the heavy pork pudding was so weighty that the string could no longer hold it. It fell from the beam, rolled down the ladder, onto the porch, and out into the garden. The little house was on a big hill, so the gigantic pork pudding rolled all the way down the street. The local folks were just coming back from the fields, and the massive pork pudding ate them all up. The roly-poly pork pudding met a herd of pigs at the edge of the village, being led by a swineherd eating bacon with a pocket knife. The preposterously large pork pudding ate all the pigs up, and then the swineherd too. But the pocket knife was open, and the swineherd cut his way out of the pork pudding, and everybody followed him out into the sunshine. If that pork pudding had not split as it did, my story would have never ended.